What's up, chat? How are we doing? Why do I have no microphone? There we go. Okay. Hello, hello, chat. How are we doing? Shalom, shalom. Welcome to week 3. Today is going to be a chill day. We're going to be very chill today. All right. So, welcome to everybody. I saw lots of people from lots of countries and lots of continents, and it is awesome to see all of us join together in one place for learning this morning or this evening or this afternoon, depending on where you're at. So, I'm going to go ahead and get switched over. We're going to take it nice and chill today. I called today the fun day, the quote unquote fun day. I don't know if I meant that literally, though. This is going to be a little bit of paperwork going over some stuff, and then we'll get into some OSINT fun if we have time. If not, we're going to be doing OSINT for like the next 3 weeks. So no worries on the OSINT. Okay, so welcome to week 3. This is day 5. Congratulations if you made it this far. So again, today is a chill day. It's a chill day. Please take notes. Please take notes. What I'm going to be showing you today is probably one of the most important things for a pen testing. This is going to talk today about the common types of pen testing. We're going to talk about the 5 stages of ethical hacking, and we're going to cover some checklists, what rules of engagements are. We're going to talk about verifying scope, how to communicate with a client, active versus passive recon, and then we'll get into some OSINT, doing some Google Foo and search engine operators, time pending today. If not, we'll definitely throw that over onto July 8th, day 6. All right. We got to get through the quote unquote fun stuff first. It is going to be, again, the most important thing that you do in your careers to know all of this. All right. On Friday, we'll talk about discovering email addresses. We'll probably talk about Google Foo quite a bit more. We'll do hunting breach passwords. We'll look at some really cool tips and tricks there. We'll look at username OSINT. We'll look at enumerating valid accounts and more, depending on what our schedule looks like and how much we get through today. All right. So let's go ahead and move on to the first thing. Let's talk about the common types of pen testing. So there are all kinds of pen testing options out there. We're going to talk about the most common, although it can get really specific if you decide to niche into a certain category. All right, so you're going to hear about these the most: externals and internals. When we hear external pen test, we're really talking about what is an external network penetration test. An external network penetration test is looking at an organization from the outside. We're going to be looking at it from the outside looking in. So what that means is we can pretend that we're going to be anywhere. So if we are somebody trying to hack from another country, or we're some kid in our mom's basement, it really doesn't matter. Our goal is to try to break into the organization from the outside. Now, with external pen testing, we look at things like vulnerability scanning, but vulnerability scanning really doesn't play a big part in external pen testing. What I usually tell clients is that if we have an external pen test and we are doing vulnerability scanning and we find a vulnerability because of patching, then there's a very good chance that somebody else has already found that vulnerability as well. There are bots going around all the time, scanning the internet, looking for vulnerabilities, and attempting to break into your network, all automatically. If you want to prove this to yourself, all you need to do is go to AWS or go to Azure or whatever, and put an SSH server up and see how many login attempts that you get within the first 24 hours. All right. Sorry, I saw chat say you were losing me, but everything looks fine on my end. So anyway, so put an SSH server up, see how many people try to log into your server. It is an incredible amount of people because there are just bots scanning all the time. So when we're looking at external penetration testing, what we are looking at is we are trying to gather intelligence about an organization. So we're looking at what's called open source intelligence, or OSINT. And open source intelligence means that we're trying to gather as much information we can about an organization. So we might want to say, who are these employees of the organization? Or what are their email addresses? What is the email address format of that organization? Has this organization or any of its employees ever been involved in a breach? And when I say that, I don't mean directly, I mean things like LinkedIn breach, Adobe breach, any major organization that's had a breach. A lot of those credentials, or at least the hashes, have been released online, and there are repositories where you can go look these things up. So we start looking for patterns. We start looking for certain passwords that we can find and tie those to people or employees. And then we start gathering that intel on that organization, and then we go try to log in with that information. So external pen testing is more about finding information about an organization, using that against them with logins, and using that against them through other means in order to make this work. So with that in mind, we also look at it from a guessing attack. We try to take advantage of the individual and weak configurations. So if we have weak configurations like weak password policy, we might try spraying something like summer 2022 exclamation mark. And there's a good chance that if it's a large organization, we're going to find something. We're going to log in. And what I tell people is, the more employees you have, the bigger the attack surface. So if you have 1,000 employees, we're going to have a much better time as a pen test company than going against somebody with 10 employees, because the probability of a bad password goes up. So anyway, what's going on with this is we're also looking at misconfigurations like MFA or no MFA. And it looks like closed captions aren't working. So I'm going to go ahead and put up the closed captions real quick. Sorry for that. I don't even actually remember. I had to restart my computer. I don't remember what the bot is that we used. So give me 1 second here. Sorry, chat. Actually, I don't know, chat. I'm sorry. Without doing this live, I don't know where the closed captioning is. I don't have that link up in the history. So I apologize. We're going to have to run without it today. Otherwise, I will have to stop the stream for at least 5 minutes to find it. So I apologize. So anyway, that's kind of an external pen test. The internal pen testing is more of the wild, wild west. So what we're doing is we're looking at the internal network pen test, and we're saying, hey, we are doing vulnerability scanning here, and we are looking at vulnerability scanning from a standpoint of, okay, well, there is going to be patching issues. There's a lot of servers and computers and stuff that when we're looking at an internal network, they just don't get patched. So external, again, we see patching really well, or really done very well. Internally, we don't see that done very well. So we do run into common vulnerabilities. Like I still see Eternal Blue all the time. I still see big vulnerabilities from like 10 years ago. I still see Windows 2003 and all kinds of other stuff along those lines. So internal pen testing, patching does matter, but internal pen testing is a lot of what is called Active Directory type pen testing. So if we look at Active Directory, there's a lot of quote unquote features of Active Directory that are inherently vulnerable. And that means that Active Directory out of the box, if you just install it, there's quite a few vulnerabilities that exist and can be taken advantage of. And Microsoft doesn't have any interest in disabling those or warning users or anything about that. So they just let it run. And if you don't know this as an organization, you just set up your network, well, then you're automatically vulnerable to these attacks. So we'll cover a lot of the Active Directory pen testing. That is like a core part of this course. And we'll talk about those later on as we get into the Active Directory pen testing. But that is what internal network is. It's really like a ton of Active Directory pen testing. We're looking at patching. We're looking at misconfigurations. We're looking at settings. And we are going to go through that process and try our best to control the domain, or we'll try to take over the domain controller, though that's not always the goal. Our goal is not always controlling the domain controller. It might be finding like intellectual property or getting to a sensitive file or some location. It's not always the goal of an organization to compromise the domain. All right. So that's internal versus external network pen testing. So outside versus inside. We also very commonly have a web application pen test. So if we're doing a web app pen test, we're looking at an application. So think about any website that you go to, those can get pen tested. If they're large organizations, chances are they do get pen tested. If they're very large organizations, chances are they might be a part of what's called a bug bounty program. And those bug bounty programs allow users to hack on them and then pay them rewards for finding vulnerabilities. It's different from a pen test because pen test looks at everything as a whole. We will look at the informational, low, medium, moderate, all the way to critical findings, where a bug bounty program might just want to know impact. How can you impact me? What is the critical vulnerability that's going to be here? And how does it affect my organization? Where a pen test looks at everything as a whole. So with the web app, we're looking at a lot of different things. And I'll show you checklist here in a little bit. I'll show you our external checklist versus our web app checklist and the vast difference of what these checklists look like. Web application pen tests almost always take at least a week just because there's so many things to go through, where an external pen test might only take a couple days depending on the size of the organization. So you'll see again those here in a little bit, but just know that web apps get pen tested. We look for vulnerabilities within an application. And it doesn't have to be that we need to compromise the application in order to be successful on a web app pen test. We're just looking for what vulnerabilities might exist within there. All right, so we also have wireless pen tests. Wireless pen testing is very straightforward. I don't know if we're going to cover that in this course, only because doing wireless will cause me to dox my location. So if we do a wireless pen test week or whatever, I'll probably just upload those videos to the course live. That way we don't do it live and you can find my SSIDs and all the ones around me and then pinpoint where I live based on some very good Wi-Fi OSINT. But wireless really has 2 or 3 options that we can pen test against. We're looking at WPA2 mostly. If you see wireless courses, by the way, teaching WEP, W-E-P, if you see them teaching WEP nowadays, that is a very outdated course. WEP is no longer really a thing. It's kind of just a, hey, I learned how to hack this this wireless device a long, long time ago, or this wireless network. But really, we're on WPA2. There's some WPA3 out there nowadays. But WPA2 personal or pre-share key is something that we'll look at a lot, and a lot of small businesses run WPA2 personal or the pre-share key. That's basically just like your home network. So if you're going and you have your home network, you have a wireless network, and you have a Wi-Fi password, that password has a handshake associated with it. That handshake associated with it is can be captured, and you can take that hash and try to crack it offline. Now, wireless passwords take a very long time to crack. However, they are often easily guessable. Organizations will a lot of times put their phone number or the name of the business or the street address or something along those lines, where it's very easy to guess if you just take a hunch or you use a very weak password list. It has to be 8-character minimum. But other than that, there's a lot of organizations that will just use very weak passwords for the WPA2. So what we do is we go in, we capture the handshake, we try to evaluate the WPA2 and see if we can crack the password. Usually we'll have the organization tell us the password, so that way we know if it's weak, even if we don't guess it within time. Again, all pen tests are timed assessments. So we might have a day on a wireless pen test, and if we only have a day and we run through all of our cracking procedures and we don't get it, it doesn't mean the password was not weak. It just means that we weren't able to find it in that time frame, where a real hacker has unlimited amount of time. So they will have time, and there are repositories and databases out there where you can compare hashes from a wireless and see if they can crack as well. So something to know. But there's also what is called WPA2 Enterprise, and that's where we start getting into a little bit of fun. We can look at evil twin attacks. We can look at EAP attacks, EAP, things like EAP hammer. We can do all kinds of fun stuff with that. And start really taking advantage of a user who might log into something that they shouldn't versus just capturing a pre-shared key through a portal. So we can do evil twin attacks with WPA2 personal, but it's more likely that we would run it with the enterprise attack. So also, we have mobile pen testing. I'm not going to get too much into mobile pen testing. It is very similar to web application pen testing, though not entirely. There's a lot of the same concepts that apply with mobile pen testing. And we won't be talking about it in this course, but it is a common one that you might see on a pen test. And there's also physical pen tests as well. So if you say physical pen testing, we mean breaking and entering into buildings, free breaking and entering into buildings, unless you work for an organization where you get caught and arrested and the documentation was not great and the process was not great. But usually physical pen tests allow you to go and break into organizations and try to social engineer your way in or lockpick or bypass security controls that are on site to get to a specific location within an organization. So a lot of times when we do the physical pen test, what we're looking at is we are trying to look and see if we can get to like a server closet or something sensitive inside of the organization. So that is pretty much everything. Now I put etc or etc down at the bottom. There are other types of pen tests just like this. There's IoT pen testing, SCADA pen testing. You can specialize in a lot of areas. There's car hacking. There's all kinds of fun stuff that you can do with pen testing. These are just the most common ones that are out there and the most common ones that you'll likely do within your job. But I've seen, early on in my career, I actually applied for a job that was doing airline pen testing. So if you can get really specialized and specifically just do aircraft pen testing the rest of your career. So it just depends on what you want to do, what interests you the most, but there's all kinds of pen testing that's out there. All right. So we've made it through that slide. Let's quickly talk about the 5 stages of ethical hacking before we move into some of the other quote unquote fun stuff. So we've got 5 stages and it kind of just runs in a circle. Now, reconnaissance is our first stage. Reconnaissance. And that's what we're entering into here. This is active versus passive. We'll talk about active versus passive reconnaissance here in a second. Once we do our reconnaissance and our intelligence gathering, we also have scanning and enumeration. And I would call scanning and enumeration to be active reconnaissance if I had to have my way with this. But that's what we're looking at. Open ports and protocols. We're trying to see if we can find any information out. And then we're going to use that and hopefully the information that we've gathered in the first 2 stages to gain access through exploitation on a organization, on a website, whatever it might be. Once we have gained access, we want to maintain access. What happens if an organization shuts down the computer, reboots? Do we lose access? What do we need to do to maintain access? And then what do we do to cover our tracks? How do we delete log files? How do we do certain things to make sure that we are not being detected? Mainly in this course, we're going to cover the first 3 steps heavily. We will talk about maintaining access through a few different ways. Something like golden tickets could be an example, or adding a user could be an example, but we're not going to get too heavily into this. And then covering tracks, deleting log files, things like that, we're not going to be teaching in this course. Any antivirus evasion stuff, if I were to teach that in a live course like this, it would be the method I would show you would be gone in a week. Okay? So that is the 5 stages. We're going to be getting into stage 1 now. All right, stage 1. So we're going to get into checklists. Here's the checklist. You just need to go to github.com/hmaverickadams. All right. So you're going to find this external pen test checklist, and we're going to talk about checklists. All of you people asking for a link because you can't type in a link. Hey, man. There are some heroes in the chat, but you guys are not one of them. All right. So let's pull up a checklist here. So here is a checklist for an external pen test. These are what we use on our externals, okay? And you can see that it is very, very small. Now, we're going to go through this here in a second. I just wanted to show you in comparison what we use on our web application pen test. Here's our checklist. All right, look at this. I'm just scrolling and scrolling. So we have a long checklist for web apps. This is why I say to you that web app pen testing is a very long process and usually takes a week to go through. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this. All right. So let's look at our checklist for our external pen test. Now, checklists are great. So if we put these through and we're working in a team, say we have a client, we build out a checklist like this, we have a team we're working with, we can put this on like a Google Sheets, for example, and we can be sharing back and forth. And if we have two people working on a pen test, we can come in here and say, okay, well, I know that the rules of engagement has been signed, so that's complete. And then you can make comments in here and you can just come through here and say, hey, I've done XYZ. I made sure I've left no stone unturned. And this is good for you, not even if you're working in a team. This is great for you if you're just doing this by yourself. So you say, hey, I have done all of these things to make sure that I am doing what I need to do for my job. Okay? So, and I will zoom in one more here. So this is showing you what we need to do in order to kind of do this. So if we look through the checklist, we need to ensure that we get a rules of engagement signed. We'll cover what rules of engagement is here in just a minute. We need to add our IPs and scope to our scope tab. What is our scope tab? Well, if we come in here, it says, hey, what IP address is available to us in this range? So if we're looking at like, I don't know, like 192.168.1.1, something like that, we come in here and we can just make comments, or we can do 1.0/24. Like if a client gives us a whole range to scan, this might be like their, I don't know, AWS websites. Who knows what they are? All right. They might tell you what they are. They might not tell you what they are. So we come through here. You have your IP range and your comments that you can put in here. And you could say, okay, yeah, I've added my scopes to the scope tab. I'm good. And then we also need to verify the customer scope, which we'll talk about as well and why that's important. Once we verify, we can scan or send our kickoff email. We'll talk about that as well. We can start our vulnerability scanning with Nessus, and then we can start getting into the OSINT and start looking at some of the things that we need to look at and conduct our different tests related to that. So within this, we have our scope. That way we know what our scope is. We have what targets might exist. So within this scope, right here, we have this whole range. This could be 254, 255 IP addresses. If we come in here, we'll add the IP addresses, if there's a related URL, what port is open, what the status is, and if we reviewed this. So we can dump something like Nessus or a Nessus output into our Excel spreadsheet. And then if you're working on a large engagement and you're working on a team, you can come in here. I've been in situations where I say, hey, I'll start from the top, you start from the bottom, and we'll go ahead and just meet in the middle. So we'll go ahead and meet in the middle, all right? So we'll come through here, look at the open port, talk about what the service is, what it's doing, if we have any findings, anything like that, all right? And then we'll come through, and if we'll get into password spraying, we'll talk about that later on. But if we do password spraying, we'll come in here, we'll say, here's the website I tried, here's the account that I tried, or the account list that I tried, and here's the password. This is very good, especially if you're working on a team. But even if you're not working on a team, this will allow you to know, hey, I've already tried this password. What if you're working on this engagement for 5 days, you're guessing all kinds of passwords, and you don't want to use the same password twice because you don't want to waste time. And you also don't want to lock people out. So you want to make sure you know what accounts you're using, what passwords you're trying, et cetera, et cetera. All right. We have breached accounts. So if we go through breach databases, we find the users and the passwords, we'll put them in here. We'll identify any login pages and login portals and put them here. That way we can do password spraying against those portals with our breached accounts, with our passwords. It all kind of ties together. And then we'll come in here and we'll identify any findings. So what was our finding? What was the IP or system that we found? Did we take a screenshot? Screenshots are important. And then we also want to write any comments that we have here. The other side of that is we also want to give kudos to our clients. We want to make sure that we are saying, you did a great job, pat yourself on the back for XYZ. Okay, so make sure you're identifying strengths and you give kudos to your client too. Not everything that they do is bad, although some clients, everything they do is bad. But we still try to give them kudos in one or two places. But there's sometimes where you have more strengths that you identify than weaknesses, and that's also a good thing as well. Okay, so we'll go through our to-dos right now. So the first to-do is that we need to make sure that we are getting an ROE signed by a client. So if we come in back into the we got the rules of engagement. I got a Jenna Marbles meme. Come on, throwbacks. Anyway, so let's go look at what a rules of engagement is here. All right, so here's a sample rules of engagement. No, I'm not sharing this out. If you want to type this out, you can. This is something that we've worked hard to kind of refine. You are welcome to copy this and type this, but I'm not just going to willy-nilly share this out. All right. So here's the rules of engagement. We absolutely have to have this signed. Absolutely have to have this signed before we start our engagement. That is step one. You saw on the checklist, step one. If the rules of engagement are not signed, we are not moving forward. Okay. So with this, our rules of engagement talk about what we can and can't do, when we can and can't do it, and who is authorized to do these types of work. All right. So in here, you got a bunch of legal mumbo jumbo. Basically, what we're saying in the first page is we're saying, hey, here's the penetration testing team. That's TCM Security and the demo corp that's going to be with us. Demo corp, we say the pen test needs to be unannounced in order to provide maximum benefit. We do tell that to our organizations and our clients because what happens is if we say, hey, we're going to be doing a pen test, and they go run and tell everybody and say, hey, they're going to be doing a pen test, guess what? Everybody's going to be ready to roll, and they're going to detect everything and be looking through logs and all kinds of stuff. So when you don't want that, you want them to be on their game as they normally would on a day-to-day basis. So we try to say, hey, don't announce that we're doing a pen test. We understand that some people will need to know, but everybody doesn't need to know. All right. And here we've got who the client point of contact is. So we've got that. We'll identify the client point of contact. That way we have anybody that we need to contact in case of an emergency. We'll do that. We also have who our point of contact is. That's whoever the lead penetration tester is on the engagement. And then we start getting into the rules of engagement. This demo one is for a web app pen test. So you'll see like it says, hey, the test is conducted from the 15th of February, 2021 until the 20th of February, or until all testing has been completed. We are going to give daily updates. Daily updates. All right. So we'll say, hey, we're starting and we're stopping. That's not always true, but we do like to update the client at least 2 to 3 times a week. If we find anything critical during an assessment, we will update them, and we'll talk about that during client communication. All right. So C stands for client. C is client point of contact. Okay. So anyway, web application penetration test is what we're doing. So here's the website that we are authorized to pen test against. Anything that's not in your scope or in your rules of engagement here, we are not pen testing against. We do not want to go out of scope. All right. We want to make sure we stay within scope. So we will not go to demosite2.com and pen test against that. We're only going to work against demo site for the rest of the time. All right. And then we're going to have test boundaries. This will identify if there's any boundaries there. When our stop point is, usually it's the last business day that we're authorized to test. We are allowed to employ methods to maintain access if we need to. The vulnerability scan, again, will not be announced to the Demo Corp sites by the Demo Corp staff. Here's when the project closes. Here's what's out of scope. Here's really what matters here. We do not want to go out of scope. Again, we want to make sure we stay within the website and we make sure that we stay in scope. In this instance, no phishing or social engineering attacks, no denial of service. If we just went willy-nilly and started phishing and doing social engineering attacks against the organization to try to get into this web app, they will be pissed. Like, they'll be angry. You do not want to go out of scope. So make sure that you have your rules of engagement signed and you are both in agreement on what you can and can't do on this. All right. Now, we have disclaimers in here that, like, hey, if there's a system outage, we are not responsible for the system outage. We are going to be using commercial or common tools. We are engaging in real world hacking activities, which could lead to system performance issues. It could crash production systems. There are things that we just don't know until we start doing it what will happen. Now, knock on wood, I have never knocked down a machine. Never. There are precautions that you take. A lot of the talks before you go into your pen test are, what are the sensitive machines within your network? Think about a hospital, for example. If you're pen testing against a hospital and you run into a situation where there are old machines or something that's like, I don't know, like a machine pumping somebody's heart for them during a surgery, you don't want to scan that machine. You want to make sure that you are not going out of scope. You want to identify what the critical machines are that you do not vulnerability scan, because a vulnerability scan can knock down a machine. Okay. So be very cautious about that. There's difference between we will knock down, or we may knock down a machine, and negligence because you didn't do your due diligence on what machines were sensitive and critical as well. So, all right. So once we get all this going through, we will go ahead and get them to sign off on this. Once they sign off of this, we are going to start performing our pen test. So we'll come into our handy dandy checklist. We'll say, yay, we've got it signed. And then we'll go out and get our IP addresses. And then we'll need to verify the scope of the IP addresses. So let's go back to our PowerPoint. We need to verify the scope. Okay. And I'm going to give you a great example of this, and we'll take a look at Tesla today. But so let me take a sip of my coffee. I've been talking nonstop. This is not typical to do a day like this. So I'm going to take a drink real quick and catch up. Okay. So Darknet Diaries. This is a great example of following scope and verifying scope. This is episode 22 if you want to check it out. There is a story in here by a gentleman named Mubix. Mubix is also Rob Fuller. He is a pen tester, and they were pen testing an organization that they described in this podcast as selling widgets. And they got their rules of engagement signed, they had their IP address, and they were off. And when they started doing their pen tests, they ran into an organization that had a very similar name and sold the very similar widgets that they sold, and ended up not being the correct organization. The first organization provided them with an IP address that was not correct. They did not validate the IP address, and they did not validate that it belonged to them. And this can happen. Like, a client can give you a typo. They can give you a typo in an IP address, and then you just go off and start scanning that IP address. And guess what? You're attacking and hacking some network that you do not have permission to attack against. So you need to be very careful in those sorts of situations. In this instance, they ended up hacking the organization that they were pen testing, but it was the wrong organization. I won't tell you how it all plays out. I think it's a great story. I think you should go listen to it. It is very, very good. So go listen to this story, but just know that, like, it is possible to go out of scope because a client gave you the wrong IP address. So you need to make sure that you validate your scope. Let's see if okay, so this does work. So a good way to validate scope is with Hurricane Electric Internet Services. So everybody's posting links in the chat. You can post this link as well. I'm not going to this website from the beginning because it will dox my location. It shows you your IP address and who your provider is and all that stuff as soon as you go to the website. So what I did was I went and found an IP address of Tesla Motors. So let's just pretend that we're pen testing against Tesla Motors. We've got this scope here, this /24 network, and we'll come in here, we'll search this IP address for Tesla and make sure that the description is Tesla. We can come in here and we can look at the AS here and click on that, and you can actually see if it'll work. Or let's try clicking on something. Looks like nothing's working, or it's delayed. But if we click into here, typically, there we go. Holy crap. Typically, what this will do will allow us to look at information about this AS. So if we come in, we can look at like the graph of it, which is interesting. But more importantly, we can look at the IPv4 prefixes, and you can see all the Tesla Motor Company's owned IP addresses. So if you're doing recon against an organization, say like you're given a red team sort of thing, like a red team assessment, and you're saying, here is a black box assessment. We're not going to give you any IPs. You can go hunt them down on a website like this and find what IP space they actually own, and then try to attack via this. So this is a great way to verify scope of what you're given and make sure that you're not going out of scope. So this is a great website. So as always, make sure we're validating, verifying scope. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. And while we're here, I'm going to go ahead and turn attendance on for a few minutes. So let me get that going. Turn attendance on. And the code for today is going to be rules of engagement. Rules of engagement. All right. All lowercase, all one word, rules of engagement. Again, you can enter this code from your academy, or you can go to the PNPT or the TCM security website that's listed below on this. Either will work. The website may lag out if you have issues with all of you going to the website at once. That could be expected. Make sure you refresh. If you get a CAPTCHA or stuck in what's called CAPTCHA hell, you can try it from a private browser. But, oh, look how smart we are. We've already blocked the word from being said in chat. Look at that. No attendance, no words, no nothing. So we're getting smarter every week, chat. All right. So now let's talk about client communication. So with our clients, we need to make sure that we are sending them communication, start and stop emails, absolutely, and emails as updates throughout the week. And depending on the length of the organization or the length of the pen test, we might need to send them multiple emails throughout the engagement. So with that in mind, this is what a client communication looks like. Say we're doing an external pen test against Tesla. I might email Elon and say, hey, our external pen test is about to begin. Per the agreement, here are the IPs that we're going to be scanning. Okay, all pen testing activities are coming from this IP address. Now, this is just a Google DNS. It's not a real IP. I mean, it is a real IP address. It's not my IP address. But if our testing were to trigger any alerting for you, please notify us. So why we tell them this is we give them kudos. If they're able to detect us, we'll give them kudos. So we'll say on a report, like, hey, we were able to be detected by this organization. And it helps them on their side know, like, hey, I should be seeing an attack from this. If I am seeing an attack elsewhere, it could be something that is actually attacking us. So that way they know on their blue team side as well what to be looking out for. But if you ever work in pen testing, there will be a time that you are doing a pen test and a client will say, hey, why are you doing this to me? I'm getting all these alerts, and it won't even be you doing whatever it is. So you will get blamed for everything that happens on a pen test. Just know that, like, during your engagement, even after your engagement, you will absolutely get blamed for some of this stuff. So it's good to have these. And also a side note on triggering alerts for your client. The clients will, okay, well, if you have an alert that is triggered, you need to validate how that alert was triggered through your client, by the way. So what will happen is companies will go through and dig through logs. For example, say like you're brute forcing a client or an organization and you're triggering, quote unquote, triggering alerts for them. What they might be doing is going through and manually looking at logs that they'll never look through if you weren't doing this engagement. So you need to validate and say, how did this find me? Was this an automated alert? Did this notify you and tell you that I was here? Or did you go hunting for this to find it because you knew I was doing this pen test? So you need to make sure that you don't just give kudos because they said, we saw you. Your job is to make sure that they are actually getting good alerts and valid alerts. All right. So we'll send this. Again, we'll send a stop email that's similar to this saying, hey, your pen test is ending. We're going to go ahead and start writing the report. We'll send an email when the report is available as well. And we'll also send any emails when we find a critical finding on a pen test. So if we are doing an external pen test and we break into their email, for example, we'll notify them. If we break into the VPN, we'll notify them. If we get on the network, we'll notify them. Like if there's default credentials running on a website and we log in with them, we'll notify them. We want to make sure that they are notified of anything critical, because if we find it on the external side of things, there is a decent chance that somebody else will also find it. So we're not usually the first ones. All right. For all of you asking what the secret code is, if you're not watching the bottom of the screen and the attendance tracker go across with the code, then that is on you. I don't know how to help you if you can't use your eyes and actually watch instead of caring more about attendance. All right. So I really can't help you. All right. So that is it for client communication. I think we're going to get into the OSINT part of the stuff finally. All right, I'm going to give it 1 more minute, by the way, on this form. 1 more minute, and then I'm turning it off. So you got until 12:43-ish. Okay, so we've got passive versus active open source intelligence and reconnaissance. Okay, so what is passive? What is active? Now, passive reconnaissance means that we're going to go and look at items without actively engaging or scanning that network, that website, whatever it is. So when we're doing passive reconnaissance, we're going out and we might be like going to Tesla's website and looking at Tesla and reading about their contact page or their job descriptions to see what type of software or applications they use. We might try to see who their employees are on LinkedIn. We might try to see what their email addresses are. This is all ideas, or these are all ideas of passive reconnaissance, because we're not actively engaging in the scanning of that website. Now, people are saying, if you go to the website, is that active? No, that is still passive, only when we start scanning it. All right. Okay, attendance is now off. Attendance is off. Sorry to anybody who did not get in. Anyway, so let's talk about some physical passive, just as an example here. So if we have physical passive, and I mean like physical location, say we're about to do a physical assessment, we might want to find some information out about that organization. For example, we might want to find location information out. So we might go to Google and we might look at satellite imagery, and we might look at what does the building look like when we're doing this? What are there any security guards that we see at this building? Are there potential areas where there might be a smoking area? And we can do this with drone recon, by the way. A lot of times on physical engagements, depending on where we're at within a city, we can use a drone and fly it over a building and nobody will even realize that you're doing it. And you can do that to look and see, okay, where are doors at? Where do the employees gather? Is there a smoking area? Do they prop the door open? Where are the areas that we can look at? And we can tell a lot of that from satellite imagery, and just post on like LinkedIn and stuff like that will give us a lot of information. Like, we will go search on LinkedIn for employees. We'll try to find out, who the important people are, what their job titles are, who are the people under them, what do they look like. That way we know kind of a good idea of what's going on. We'll also try to look at like employee photographs from gatherings and meetups and stuff, and see how are these people dressed. Sometimes if you look at satellite imagery, you can see how people are dressed as well. So is it business casual? Are they in jeans and a t-shirt? Are they in suits and ties? It's very important to know how people dress so you don't show up on site in the inappropriate attire. And we can look at pictures as well. I have dug through people's social media to try to find interesting items. I've seen badge photos. I've seen computer photos, desk photos. And computer photos and desk photos are great because I know what the inside of your office looks like. I know if you send me a picture of your computer, I can see what applications you have open and running at the time. That'll tell me some internal information about your organization. And I have run through all kinds of these situations. Recently, somebody tagged me on social media and said, is this photo that I'm seeing right now a very bad idea? And I'm going to share this with you. Okay, I've blurred out his face and I blurred out the post. This is from a week ago. This is somebody working in information security as a senior in information security, senior director. And he posted his badge photo, picture of his computer, which is a MacBook Pro. Just kind of this is what I got on my first day at Chipotle. Okay. And somebody tagged me and said, isn't this a really bad idea? And I said, yes. I said, this is a very bad idea. Because now, look, this badge right here is not very difficult to recreate. We can make this very easily in Photoshop and then just use that to carry around. And now we have a Chipotle badge if we want to go try to do a physical pen test against Chipotle. So just know people are watching you. People are watching you and what you're doing. And I would be going and searching LinkedIn for posts just like this to try to find this kind of stuff. Somebody asked if we do RFID copying. Yes, you can do RFID copying. There are badge cloners. One's called a BOS cloner, BOS cloner. There's other types of cloners that are out there as well. So, but we're not getting into that in this course because we are not doing physical pen testing in this course. All right. So, but badges can be cloned, and you do not have to be that close to somebody anymore to clone a badge. The proximity readers and what they're capable of is incredible. Okay, so let's go ahead and flip back over to our handy dandy PowerPoint. And we're going to talk about one more thing. I'm going to take a drink real quick, and then we might actually be able to wrap up early. Okay, so we're going to get into web and host fingerprinting and looking at reconnaissance for specifically websites. We'll also do it for networks. We'll do it for open source intelligence gathering. We'll show a bunch of tips and tricks. With that in mind, there are things that we can do if we're looking at websites, for example. We might do what's called target validation. Again, like we looked up the IP address and validated the IP address. We could do target validation through something like Whois, through NSLookup, through DNS Recon. These are tools that you don't need to know what they are right now. If you do, more power to you. But we can do target validation through those tools. We can also look up and find subdomains. There's a lot of subdomain tools. Even what I have listed on here is kind of old. There's way new ways to find subdomains, and we'll talk about those as we move on. But just because we see Tesla.com doesn't mean that Tesla.com is what's available to us. There might be like, I don't know, like dev.tesla.com or vpn.tesla.com or some sort of sensitive web subdomain that's out there for Tesla that if it's in scope, we can go out and attack. So it's important to know the subdomains that exist and try to find those as well. So here we've got fingerprinting, and we can use all kinds of tools like Nmap. Wapalizer is the one that we use most commonly, but there is WhatWeb, Built With, Netcat, and basically you could just go to a website and pull that website up. And let me see, I can even show you a quick example. Let me load Firefox really quick, bring this over. So if I go to tesla.com, I'll bring this back. Okay, so if I go to tesla.com, this tool right here is Wapalizer, and it will just tell me what is running on Tesla's website. Like, it's running Drupal, it's got Google Analytics, programming language is PHP. We could see what JavaScript libraries are loading here. So this is really nice information that we can pull down fairly quick with just a plugin that goes into Firefox. So this is right here a good example of passive reconnaissance. We're finding out information without doing any sort of scanning, just loading this web page. So this is a great tool. Built With is a great one as well. WhatWeb is another one. You can use Netcat. There's a lot of different ways to do fingerprinting. This is an old slide. We don't use WeLeakInfo anymore. That was seized a long time ago, and I think recently seized again. We use a website called Dhash to find data breaches, but we'll talk about Dhash in the next session, actually. And what we're going to be doing is looking at data breaches, and we'll go through and we'll say, have these employees ever been involved in a data breach? Can we look at a specific employee and kind of narrow down like password reuse, or something like, I don't know, like Cowboys 2020, and then we see another data breach with Cowboys 2021. Well, we might guess that Cowboys 2022 might be their password currently, or some format of that if they're constantly using the same passwords over and over again. So, and that, my friends, I do believe is it. So we're going to finish here. Our Google lesson will take at least, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 minutes. And so I don't want to run over on time. I'm going to go ahead and come back to the screen if I can find this properly. Somebody wants the screen one more time? Yeah, we can do that. One sec. I'm muting my microphone for a second so you don't hear me just like viciously gulping my coffee. But my throat is incredibly dry. I was recording last night. We've got a Python course coming out next Friday. Above and Beyond, there's a lot of lessons that are the same from last week, but there's also going to be Above and Beyond lessons and projects and stuff that are going on. And we'll use F strings, so everybody will stop yelling at me about formatting strings. We'll use F strings, and we'll improve upon some of the things that we did last time. Okay. Somebody asked for page 2 really quick of the ROE. Sure. There's page 2 of the ROE. I'm not going to keep putting up pages. If you weren't here, you weren't here. You can watch the VOD and then take screenshots there. All right. Shalom, shalom. It is time to crack into my Rockstar. Rockstar, I doubt you're watching, but if you are, please sponsor me. I will drink this on stream every single time. hands down. 25 weeks. Let's do some heart damage together. Ghost Energy is very good as well. I would take a sponsor from Ghost as well. Their Sour Patch Kids are very delicious. Where did I buy this top from? This top came from gosh, where did I get it from? I think I got it at the Hornets game, actually, at a Charlotte Hornets game. I saw a lot of complaining today, by the way, as I was reading through chat about how boring this was. If you find this boring, by the way, you probably shouldn't be a pen tester. Like today was probably the most important lesson that we're going to give outside of reporting. And if you're not interested in paperwork and reporting and writing documents, then you probably shouldn't be a pen tester. Like you should probably just leave now. It's not all fun and games. There's a lot of work behind the scenes. So, am I secretly Hugo? I wish. Zach, for some reason, I'm not getting the stuff on my screen. I don't know why the issue is. I'm not seeing the overlays on my screen. I think my stream is just like broken. So that's cool. I guess I'll bring up the other stream and I'll just try to watch there because it's not working very well. Okay. I'm not too familiar with the bug bounty stuff. I'm not a bug bounty person. Um, I've heard of Safe Harbor. I don't actively participate, so I couldn't speak on it. I can speak on the differences of bug bounty and RE, but being that I have no experience in bug bounties, I can't speak to Safe Harbor in depth. What's my recommendation for a note-taking application? Have you ever heard of Obsidian? I have. A lot of people like Obsidian. I use Notion. I think Notion is great, but everybody has their preferred note-taking. Some people like OneNote. Trillium's another one. There's a ton of note-taking applications that are out there, but I use Notion pretty much exclusively. How many course sign-up emails are contained in your breach post? I have no idea. We haven't looked through any of that. That's a great question. The OSINT video is coming out on Friday. The issue was that we are waiting for sponsorship. We got sponsored by FlexiSpot. Yay. They sent a desk, and because of the holiday, the top half of the desk arrived, but the bottom half didn't arrive until just this morning. So I'm still waiting to record that ad, get that approved, and then we'll get the video out on Friday. But last week I forgoed the video that we were going to be doing in order to do a video on privacy. I felt like that was more important to do a video on Tor and how to access the dark web a little bit more safely. Can you tell us about your airline's pen test job? So it wasn't a pen test job that I got. It was an offer that I got, but it was on an Air Force base in California, and it's escaping my the name's escaping me. But basically, it's like 40 minutes outside of Palmdale. Somebody here will know it. Um, I was researching the drive time, and it still is like 30 to 40 minutes of traffic once you were inside of the base. So it was Edwards. Thank you. So once like for the remoteness and where it was at and the amount of traffic and everything else, I ended up turning down that job. But they were willing to teach you how to pen test airplanes. So I'm sure there's other jobs out there that are like that you can go work for and work with. I've never seen like an airplane pen testing guide. So I'm sure it's a lot of it's internal knowledge for sure. Do engagements ever change while they are in progress? Yes, but rarely. Um, Here's the thing about scope is that scope is like everything is based on the scope of the assessment. So like when we quote out a price to a client, say we quote a price and it's like 50 IP addresses. If they come back and say we found 25 more, we're going to say, well, we can't change what the scope is we agreed upon unless you're willing to pay more money, especially during an engagement like added in. If it was like, hey, there's one more IP address we forgot to mention, okay, we might change that. Or like, hey, our web address that we're going to be using has changed. Like, here, we were going to give you a dev environment and we've changed the URL of that to this. That's fine as well. But it just depends on the situation. It does happen, but it's very rare. I exclusively use Nessus Pro. Um, the other vulnerability scanners that we've looked at have been incredibly expensive for the most part, like more expensive than Nessus. I think Nessus does the job that it needs to do. Like with pen testing, we're only looking at 10% of vulnerabilities and findings coming from a vulnerability scanner. And that can be Nessus, that could be Burp Suite, be Qualys, whatever you want it to be. We're only going to find 10%. So I just need it to be decent at finding that 10%, and then I'll go find the 90% myself. So I will take whatever is reliable and affordable, which is Nessus in that situation for an organization. If a subdomain is not under agreement in the ROE, can you still pen test it? No. So in a situation where subdomains would be open and accessible, it would be an asterisk that you put there, like a wild card. You would say like asterisk.tesla.com is in scope. And then that way you know. But if you get www.tesla.com as being in scope, then that's all you get. Also, thanks for the recent subscribers. Tori, Getty00, Very Curious AT, It's Cheese 444. Thank you all for the subs that just came through. Is it necessary to access the dark web as a pen tester? I have never had to do that. There are hacking tools and stuff sold there. There's no reason for a pen tester to need access to those. There is really no reason for you as a pen tester to need to go on there. Like in theory, you could go source some of the recent data breaches and like have up to date lists more recently, but eventually those will all make their way to dhash and other sources as well. Kanemi, thank you so much for the Prime sub. Appreciate that. Is PNPT going to have a payment plan? PNPT does have a payment plan. We used to use a firm, but you can now use PayPal's payment plan to go through that as well. So I don't know what countries it's restricted to. It might just be the US, but we do have a payment plan option. What can you do to make this session actionable? We're going to get into that more next session. For now, there's not a lot that we showed in terms of demonstration. It's more of high level. So we'll get into more action items. But yeah, in theory, I mean, you can go to Google and start searching things about an organization, LinkedIn, look at who employees are. You can use Wappalizer to identify technologies. So there are some things that you can pull away from this, but we'll get into more action items later on. Have I done pen testing for PCI DSS compliance? Yes, a lot. A lot of organizations come to us because it requires externals, internals, risk assessments. There's a lot of things that the PCI will require, and so organizations will come to us for that. I saw a question about what the surprise is for India. I can't really say. I can just say that I'm coming to India at some point, but I can't tell you for what or for when or for why. Uh, the axolotl tank, how's it going? The cycle is the ammonia is still sitting in there, and we have no nitrates or nitrites. So we are not growing any bacteria currently. I might have to go out and get some quick start and kind of get the bacteria growing. The ammonia is just kind of sitting in there and not doing anything. So any books that you recommend we should follow along with this course? Not entirely. A lot of the pen test books that are out there, especially network related, are very outdated. There should be a network pen test book released, in my opinion, but who has time to write those sorts of things? So if there is one, I'm sure there are some out there. They're just not mainstream. They might be done with like Pact or some other publisher. But honestly, I'm not tracking those kinds of books, and I really don't like reading those kinds of books. Sorry, chat. I'm behind because the restream is not working. I don't know. Oh, now restream is working again. Okay. Um, so how often do people request physical pen tests along with web or network pen tests? So physical is probably our least requested. It's very, very specific in what it needs in its requirements. So like an organization has to want one or need one. I am not very good at sales in terms of selling something to a client that they don't need. I don't really believe in that. Now, if they like mention it or they're interested in it or they have some sort of need for it, I'll pitch them the pen test. But usually, how I sell clients on stuff is I sell them on what they need and what they approach me for, and then we do things based on those conversations. So physicals don't happen a lot, but they do happen. Um, Web or network happens quite a bit. Like external pen tests are probably the most common. Web pen tests are second, and I would say internal pen tests are third. What happens if you can't find any issues after a pen test? There's always findings, though they might be lower informational. There's always findings. We've never had a pen test with no findings. I've never had a client be upset about a pen test with no findings. Typically, if the client wants you to find something, like here's how this goes. If a client wants you to find something, it's because they need something purchased. And they're doing a pen test in order to prove a concept to their boss or stakeholders or whatever that they need this one item or whatever it might be. They will nudge you in a very, very specific direction and say, look here, find something here because we need this for to purchase. They will very much direct you when they need it. So most clients don't complain if you don't find anything. Do we use internal checklists or pen test checklists for internal pen tests? Yes, we do. We have got a checklist for those three things. And sorry, chat, we're a little slow today too because we are trying we're trying the AMA without any subs only. We've been running subs only. Looks like actually maybe it's flipped back on. I can't tell. All my screens aren't updated, but We're trying to run it without subs only in order to be able to open this up to more people. So the only open source alternative to Nessus Pro that I know of is what's called OpenVAS. OpenVAS. So that would be the one and only alternative that I can think of. I've always used Pro Tools because work had them or we needed them. So if you find something that's not in scope, what should be your action? It's to leave it alone. Now, if you like, I'll give you an example. If you're like researching an organization and you find a website that they have, and like on that website that you navigated to, the first thing you click on is a website with a directory listing, and in that directory listing is like a backup of their website. And I've had this happen before. If that page exists and it's out of scope, it could be that you were navigating around, you landed on something out of scope, you didn't scan or attack it, but you still found something of value. Then in that situation, you should still report it, but you don't go hunting for those things. If that makes sense. You don't go hunting for those things. I'm just going to grab a random. Okay, we got one there. There are special considerations when pen testing against systems running in the cloud from an ROE perspective, like notifying the provider. Not anymore. Like back in the day, AWS and Microsoft, they had rules that you can just like, or a form that you could submit and say, I'm going to be doing pen testing against this. If you go look at the regulations now, they don't require that you do that anymore. You can still notify them and give them a heads up, but for the cloud providers, you don't have to do it. They're getting attacked all the time. Do you recommend stock accounts or just private mode for LinkedIn Recon? So I would recommend a stock account. The private mode won't work for everything on LinkedIn. A lot of times they'll like let you private browse to one page and then you have to sign in anyway. So it's useful to have a stock account for that. I just set something up that, you try to make a few connections with people that are open connectors, and then you then establish connections. Hopefully, you make those second connections or something where you can start seeing other people's pages. What's the most frequent vulnerability that you see when doing external pen testing? It's probably web ciphers, like web ciphers being out of date, those types of things, like Suite 32 attacks, those sort of attacks or vulnerabilities that are out there that are not really like gonna cause any problems, but it's still reportable. Or like wildcard certificates or out of date certificates. Those are the most common things, honestly. The curry mentor, I don't think you want a cooking channel with me, period. I am a terrible cook, unfortunately. I can make some decent mac and cheese though. So you typically won't come across a honeypot in an engagement for a pen test. If you're doing red team work, you might, but usually you're not going to be seeing honeypots. Like they're not going to be like a client's not going to want to waste your time with that. They might, but they typically won't. Do we do physical pen testing at TCM Security? Yes, we do. I think Zach has a video on it on his YouTube channel about one that we went on recently. So go check out IT Career Questions YouTube channel. There's a nice little video on it. I love watching my emails. I can't see my emails, but like anytime I live stream, I can just see like the ticker going up, the number in my inbox going up, and I know it's all about attendance. I know it's all about attendance. Do you think CTFs are good for OSINT practice? They can be. There are some really good OSINT CTF challenges, but usually they're like a small subset of that CTF. But if you want to go practice OSINT CTF type stuff, I think that's great. They do have some like the Trace Labs and other OSINT related CTFs or OSINT specific, but those are to a different set of challenges. You're trying to find missing people, so it's a little bit different. For staying up to date on cybersecurity news, your call saying Twitter never used before, any certain places to follow. Um, Yeah, so I would look into what's called TweetDeck. TweetDeck. It's built into Twitter, and what it allows you to do is curate lists or boards essentially on your page, and that will allow you to then narrow down like I want to track all my news, and I'm going to put that from these sources on this one board, and that way you can look and see different things in different situations. But TweetDeck is amazing. Looks like Zach just posted the YouTube video for his physical pen test video. So we will definitely raid somebody before we end. I promise. Do you ask your clients to whitelist before performing an external pen test? No. Only situation in which that occurs, well, there's two situations. One situation would be that if they are blocking all traffic except for a whitelist, then we'll ask them to whitelist us. The other situation would be if they block us, but we would rather get blocked. So we will test out their detection mechanisms and their SOC and whatever else is going on and see if they block our IP address. Then we'll email them and say, "Hey, great job. You blocked us. You saw us. Awesome. Now, can you let us test the rest of the time without having to do that?" And then we'll just notate in the report that we would have gotten blocked had we not been doing a pen test and been whitelisted. Has a shady person or somebody with nefarious intentions ever attempted to work for you? Has a shady person ever worked for me? Yes. I don't think that they had. Well, depends on what your intentions are. We had a salesperson, and it's so hard to hire salespeople. But we had a salesperson who was moonlighting at like two other IT companies while also earning a salary, and it started becoming suspicious because in 3 months, like he had brought no meetings or no anything to us. And so I ended up seeing his LinkedIn because he had like blocked me on LinkedIn. So I went and looked at his LinkedIn on my SOC account and noticed that he had two other jobs listed on there that was not TCM security. So we did actually a little social engineering campaign, and I had a friend call him, say, "Hey, I am from so and so company. I am looking for a pen test. I got your card at a conference." And he recommended to him another company that was not TCM security. So he was basically just collecting a paycheck. I pretty much fired him that day. I've never had to fire anybody before, but yeah. So would love to hire a salesperson, and it's going to take finding the right person. I've always wanted to have a good salesperson, but they are hard to come by, and they're hard to come by that actually know what pen testing is and how to sell it and pitch it to companies. So yeah, that is our sales experience and what we've had to live through. So, and what's better on that is I paid a recruiting company for that guy. I hate using recruiting companies. I swore I never would. Somebody kept pestering me about using their services, so I did, because my last salesperson before that wasn't great, but at least he was like honest and reliable. He just like wasn't a salesperson. I would hire him for anything else, but the recruiting company, I ended up paying, I can't even imagine. I think it was like 15 or 20% of his salary that I lost also. So in like 3 months of hiring that guy, I think I lost $30,000 off of that, which was crazy. What percent of a person or pen test is spent doing the technical assessment? What percent is spent reporting? So a technical assessment, I would say we usually spend 50-50. So if we have a week for a pen test, we'll take a week for report writing. Now, as you get good and you get better at things and you have like a repository of findings, you can usually cut down that report writing process to a couple days, and then that goes to a QA. So, like, say for example, Joe does a pen test. Joe will send me the pen test. I will QA it, and then I'll send it back to him for any revisions. He'll send it back to me, and then we'll approve it, ship it off. Same thing. Like, there's always a QA process that gets involved. So usually we get it out within a week, but your side of it is probably 2 to 3 days, and then you have some revisions you might have to make. Are we covering cloud? We are not covering any cloud in this course. This is not a cloud pen test course. Is this course recommended or useful for web pen testers? We will get into web pen testing. There will be a lot of useful stuff. We're going to cover like OWASP top 10. It's not going to be full and complete make you a web pen tester. That is not what this is. This is a practical network penetration testing course, but there will be some web app that's covered. It will give you good foundation for sure. Have you ever found signs of a compromise while doing a web pen or a pen test? Yes. I can't really go into details, but yes, it happens, unfortunately. Somebody said AD can be made in Azure. Yes. However, I'm not going to have a bunch of people sign up with their credit cards, forget to shut down their Active Directory machines, and then come shaking their fist at me because they got a crazy bill in the mail or in their email. So I'm not going to recommend a cloud course without a lot of precautions. You can say, yeah, there's free credits and all this other stuff, but as somebody who has left their machines running and received a bill before, it's not a fun experience. How long do you let stock accounts mature before using them? Yeah, it definitely depends. I would say it depends on the situation. Like LinkedIn, you don't need a stock account to mature. Now, like if you're going to be posting and making it look realistic and stuff like that, that's one thing. Something like Twitter, you need to either go buy an old account if you wanted to, or you just start making an account, start posting tweets, and like let that mature for a while. You can make an account look like it is something else. So you can start posting and just interacting and not being a real person. There are well-known stock accounts too. So it just depends. Like, what is it? The Swift on security is a good example of a stock account that's got like, I don't know, 300 plus thousand followers on it. So, which they're a real person, but they obviously don't dox their identity. So I would still consider that to be SOC-ish of account. Shakira security, yeah. Uh that's a tough question. I would choose the 25th anniversary, honestly. I think the body style is better than the Diablo. Any horror stories of Pentest gone wrong? Nothing too bad. Most of our horror stories currently are just because we have asshole clients. And they know who they are. We tell them when they're being assholes. Usually, and I said this last stream, like we have what's called an asshole fee. Like if you're just an absolute horror to deal with, we just double the price, and either you pay it or we don't like have to deal with you. Or if you're really that bad, we'll just fire you completely. So we've had clients that we fired because they're just that bad. Can we expect another Teaching My Wife series? If she's ever up for it. I've asked her to stream before and she doesn't want to stream anymore. So for you people asking where the week 3 Python video is, why don't you go take a look on Twitch and find it? It's there. Just because it's not in the first place that you look under the live footage, remember that stream cut out. So I went through a compiling the video and making it into a nice video for you and uploaded it. So if you look under uploads, maybe it's there, but you got to look with your special eyes. You got to look with your special eyes. Any videos about building your own security company and the challenges you faced? I have videos on the initial creation. There's like 6 videos if you go to the YouTube channel about like, hey, I'm thinking of starting a company. Hey, I've quit my job. Hey, here's like the progress of what I've made. But there hasn't been anything in the last year or so. And those videos don't do very well. Like you'll get a couple thousand views on them, but most people don't really care. Which I know there's people that care. It's just a very niche audience, so it's hard to make those kinds of videos. Would I hire a remote sales rep? Sure. If you think you're qualified, you can send over your salary requirements and your resume, and tell me why. We're not actively posting a job, but I'm always open to an opportunity for the right person. You'll have to find my email. You can do your OSINT and do all that, but you have to be US based. You can be remote, but you have to be US based. What do you enjoy more, teaching or pen testing? I like both, and I'm going to be torn when I have to decide between one and the other. I would say that I like teaching more because of the rewarding, or how rewarding it is in terms of like helping people find jobs and get into the field and hopefully changing lives. With pen testing, I'm just helping organizations. Yeah, it's fine. But with teaching, like you're helping the individual. So, I think I prefer teaching just from that standpoint alone. Okay, I'm getting a lot of we should raid XYZ. I'm open to taking raid recommendations. I'm going to go ahead and navigate out to Twitch. But I know we rated Allie last time, and she had a very great, genuine reaction. But I feel like we should try to raid somebody else, somebody different. So if you've got recommendations, please let me know. We can look in the science and technology category, and see if there's anybody. I am looking now. Some of you guys, you simp a little too hard. That's all I'm gonna say. Are there any actual hacking tech streamers that are on? I don't even see anybody. I'm not rating OffSec. All right, I found my raid, and you can't convince me otherwise. All right, we're rating. This person only has 10 people watching. I think that's nice. So thank you everybody for today. We'll be back on Friday. We'll have another great day. Let's go raid this person. Let's make somebody's day, shall we? Peace out.